In the worldview of ancient people, any area that differed from the surrounding landscape has always been inhabited by various spirits and gods. Suffice it to recall, for instance, the Olympus, which was one of the few mounts in the Mediterranean that had a snow-covered peak inhabited by Olympic gods. The Toftras you may find yourselves in were also considered sacred by our ancestors. Why? For instance, unless we look either to the left or to the right, we may find the common Podolsky landscape. So here, just in the middle of the common Podolsky landscape, there are endless hills and a sort of a rock ridge. Therefore, from the point of view of ancient people, the spirits and gods should have lived here, since that place was considered sacred. By the way, it is still considered sacred. Later, we may go down and take a look at the sacred place, which is still honored nowadays. One could find various shrines here. This Toftra is called Vysoky Kamin. It is considered one of the most beautiful in the Toftra Ridge, somewhat reminding the Crimean Mounts. Well, there are somewhat similar regarding the fact that the Crimean Mounts have limestone outcrops at the top. You may find the limestones here as well. Those limestones are the traces of ancient reefs. That elongated Toftra refers to the Tethys Ocean. On the other hand, when you take a look at the other side, you may find mount-shaped Toftras located a little bit lower. They refer to the Hermit Sea, but those are the traces of the Great Barrier Reef of the Tethys Ocean. Toftras are considered one of the most mystical in the world, and the only ones in Ukraine and Europe that do not have a tectonic origin. The matter is that Toftras are the Great Barrier Reef of the primordial Tethys Ocean, which was on our territory several million years ago. Thus, they are the Great Toftras. After the ocean started to regress on the territory currently occupied by Ukraine, there was the Sarmatic Sea. Then a second barrier reef has been formed therefrom along with those small Toftras. That is the only mountain massif in the world that has a dual origin. Those are two barrier reefs. The first is the barrier reef of the primordial ocean, and the other one is the barrier reef of the Sarmatic Sea. About 20 or maybe 15 million years ago, the territory you are standing on was covered by the sea called the Sarmatic. Sometimes they call it Galician. It was large and deep. In the coastal part of that sea, about 35 kilometers from the shore, an underwater reef has been gradually formed at the bottom, since this part of the sea was densely populated with various living organisms. Lots of them contained limestone, a limestone skeleton, limestone houses, etc. It is actually from those organisms that an underwater reef like the Australian one has been formed. After a long time out-forming procedures, at a time when the Carpathians were being formed and the territory was raised, the sea regressed, and the former underwater reef found itself on the surface. They couldn't see it at the time like we currently do. Many years have passed. Rain fell, snow melted, and all those formations have been washed and prepared, thus emerging on the surface. So today, we may find a unique formation in geological terms, namely a formation of a pan-European scale, which is called the Toftra Ridge. It stretches from the village of Pitkamin in the Lviv Oblast, through the Ternopil region, Khmelnytsky region, through Moldova up to Romania. Why does it attract an interest? Toftras have always been mystical mounds. They are very beautiful. They have lots of beautiful nature-made objects. Thus, you should know that almost all the spiritual traditions and religions of the world claim that it's in the most beautiful places of nature that connection with God occurs. Each religion and spiritual current consider Toftras the sacred mounds. Many cultures have been passed through Toftras, namely the remnants of Tropilian, Scythian, and ancient Slavic Vedic culture. There are lots of Christian monuments here. Each religion on the territory of our country, from ancient times to the present, consider Toftras the sacred mounds, the mountains that allowed you to communicate with God. Behind me is a clear evidence that the local mounds are still considered sacred. That is the so-called taste of Holy Mother. There is a weathering from above, resembling a human trace. Local residents believe that when Holy Mother followed an unknown journey to Pachayev, she stopped on those mounds and left many traces here. Local residents call them small traces. There are lots of these small traces here, and that one is the most honorable. Formation itself attracts an interest. First, such structures are not quite typical for the foot of Toftras. So one may suggest that this is a man-made megalithic structure. Someone once dragged those stones and put them against each other. That is actually not just a trace of Holy Mother, as it is currently believed, but it is some ancient pre-Christian altar, probably from the early Bronze Age, or even later, since there are Tropilian settlements here. What is the most interesting? I do not know exactly where, but according to ancient literature, their archaeological excavations have been carried out in the territory of the village of Ivakhnivtsi, as well as on the territory of Vysoky Kamen at the beginning of the century, in the Tsarism period. A barrow with an early Bronze Age burial site has been excavated. It can be somehow associated with the early Bronze period, and probably even more ancient times. Lots of shrines, menhirs, large megalithic structures made of megalithic stones, as well as caves and cave towns inhabited by monks were left in Toftras. As I already mentioned, those were people of many spiritual traditions and religions. When a spiritual tradition emerged, the monks were meditating and praying in caves. Then it was replaced by another spiritual tradition. So monks of a new spiritual current again prayed in caves. Those caves have been prayed for generations by people of different faiths. When we start exploring Toftras, we may find the remains of all the cultures that have ever lived on Earth. All of those are in Toftras, but still unexplored. Now that we're exploring Toftras, we may find that there are lots of abandoned shrines. Archaeologists have not yet studied them. Thus, no one can say which exact civilization built some of those shrines. Riddle comes after riddle. Those are quite mystical and interesting mounds, considered the only dual barrier reef in the world. So I guess that the Toftras research era has begun. I believed that it is in Toftras that the knowledge of those spiritual currents that were once here has been preserved. So by exploring those objects, we may extract the ancient knowledge of our ancestors and once again make it the domain of not only our generation and our Ukraine, but also of an entire world. This work should be continued, since this is a very important work. We have just found that there are shrines and dolmens in Toftra Ridge, and it provokes lots of questions. Who has built those shrines? When have they been first built? They go back millennia, but not centuries. So there are lots of things left to explore and search. In 1990, the Medobory Nature Reserve has been created. It has been actually created on the most wooded and preserved part of that Toftra strand. There is a number of historical and cultural monuments on the territory of the reserve. There are Franco rocks, as well as lots of funnels and karst funnels located on the territory of the reserve. Probably the most famous is the Zbruck cult center, including 3 ancient settlement shrines of Zvenigorod, Bogit and Govda, considered 3 healing springs, containing water with unique healing properties. It allows to treat various diseases. There are also settlements that accompany those settlement shrines. Currently their number is 15, and this cave at the entrance is one that currently called Pustka Vidludnika. Probably it was somehow used by pagans, but we know for certain that starting from 14th up to 16th century, monks who were missionaries lived here, regularly replacing each other, and they had to turn people who were pagans away from paganism and make them Christians. In the 16th century, the revived Holy Trinity monastery has already been built, and the very last evidence on the ancient settlement itself dates back to 16th century. Most likely there was no such powerful current of paganism or people who were pagans. No one knows what happened in the period from 16th to 18th century in that cave, and who was its inhabitant. In 19th century, this cave was inhabited by people who were called Vidludniki or Hermits by the local residents, since they lived in seclusion, not communicating with people. We know at least 2 of them. The last inhabitant of this cave was a herbalist. He was an assistant of the physician from Zbruck. There was a physician in Zbruck who had his own assistant. He came here for the season, collected medicinal herbs here, and then helped physician to treat people. He settled here for some reason, became a permanent resident of this cave, and lived here until 1914. When we created the reserve, we have been collecting testimonies from old-timers of the village of Kurtiliv. There were 2 such opinions. It is likely that those memories refer to different people. The last resident, who was a herbalist, has initially lived to a very old age, and when he became already old and feeble, a young guy from the village took care of him. He suggested to stay beside him and said, "You're already so feeble, so maybe I will stay." Then an old man replied, "When I need you, you will feel it." One morning, the guy was about to go to Sataniv and suddenly heard that Vasil was calling him, if I'm not mistaken about his name. Well, there was actually such a large distance that it was impossible to hear, but he heard clearly that somebody was calling him. When he came to his place, he was already dying. When he died, he was buried near the cave. A huge stone cross was installed on the cave, but then his relatives reburied him in the cemetery of the village of Toste. Moreover, There was another version, according to which one of the residents claimed that he died from a bullet wound during the World War I. There was also such a version. In the cave itself, there is a stone bed and a stone pillow. Also, there is an outlet hole, where they smoked, cooked food, probably warmed up a little, since they have been continuously living here and eating things collected. Although there are different stories about that. The last Vidludnik, Hermit, who settled here, admitted lots of people, so he had a vast fortune there, but no one knows where all those gone. Even such a version exists. But after the last inhabitant of this cave died, the local residents set up a chapel here and celebrated huge services for green holidays. According to literature, when there was a service here on green holidays, the shops were located from the Zbruck valley up to Sataniv. There was a place of mass pilgrimage. We may find out that people visited the place for a very long time, and that chapel has existed until 1939. Later, when the Soviets came, that cross has been thrown down and never found till nowadays. It has retained only in old photos. The place has been abandoned. After Ukraine became independent, a local resident, who was a former employee of our reserve, has restored this chapel. Services were held here again, and they continued until the start of operation of church, where the Holy Trinity Monastery was located. Those services stopped to be held, but this prayed place has been known for a very long time, thus it has such a sacred meaning. We have found that there are structures like stone fences that have been built by the Scythians. Then there was the Vedic Slavic faith, which also built its own earth mounds on top of those stone fences. But probably these were the Scythians who have built those on the place where once there were some buildings of Tripilia. And then, in the times of the Slavic Vedic faith, there were Christian monks here. Every culture and each religion has transferred sacred places and settlements from ancient times to the present. Therefore, all the cultures that were on the territory of our country have left their traces in Toftras, starting with archaeological settlements up to the cult ones. I guess that Puscha Vidludnika could be the temple of Veles. Why? Because the symbol of the Slavic god Veles is the bear's paw. You may find it on that rock. Secondly, there is a legend saying that a large dragon snake once lived here. Even archaeologists found a bone during excavations, one part of which resembled a dragon's head, while a dragon's eye was carved on the wall in this cave. Veles could turn into a giant dragon snake at the beginning of the worlds and help all the other gods create the universe. There are many legends about it. It might have been before the shrines of Veles. Archaeologists will keep on doing excavations and probably find confirmation of that version. Following 16th century, it has already become a Christian shrine. There is already a small Christian temple where Vidludniki, hermits, prayed to God and did wonderful things. There is still a pilgrimage to those places of representatives of various religions who respect each other, since this is all our history. All the religions and cultures that once were in our territory are considered our heritage. It is the same and inseparable, hence there can be no conflicts. Therefore, it is actually a place of pilgrimage for people of various religions.